Welcome to Biblical Viewpoints, a program brought to you by the Churches of Christ and dedicated to the restoration of New Testament Christianity. For over 30 years, it has been the intent of this program to uphold the Bible as the final authority in religious matters. You have heard man's viewpoints, but we invite you to open God's Word and join us as we search for the biblical viewpoint.
All right, Drew, today we're going to start to unpack a little bit of this. And as promised, we're not going to try to parse out every fine detail. That's a mistake in trying to understand the book. We got the kind of the box top of the puzzle out there, if you will.
Yeah.
So now we can start to make some sense of some of the things that we see. And so get into some of the finer points, specifically today with who is the villain in the book. Everything in the world's been suggested. I don't know, probably the last 5 presidents have been the Antichrist and the beast, or whatever the beast is coming up. The European Union, I know at one time was the beast, and then you get into all of that stuff. I've heard all kinds of fanciful things, and those things have come and they have gone, and yet this stuff didn't actually happen. And so people go back to the drawing board. We're convinced, and I think we can make the case here today, that the villain in this drama is actually not that difficult to identify if we understand specifically Old Testament prophecy, the place and time when John was writing, who was in charge, and some of the other things. There are clues in this book that make it pretty plain if I don't take the futurist and fanciful view that we're talking about Rome. We'll just go ahead. That's the instrument that Satan is using. And so in this, we're going to see a dragon, a sea beast, a land beast, and then from that, we're going to see this world power. And every bit of course, Satan is the mind behind it. It's his program, but he's using these people in power to bring that about. And so, and a lot of what we see, it's interesting too, when you look at a lot of the language that's used to describe Jesus, it's language that Rome used to describe the Caesars, specifically Augustus. The Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, he was hailed. That's what gave him deification later, because he came in at a tumultuous time in the world, was able to settle all the civil war, all that stuff. He brought peace. And it was real peace as far as political peace is concerned. And that was kind of Rome's program. But there was this elevation of man, and we see all of that in the background. But I think with these beasts particularly, the dragon's pretty easy to identify, especially when you get into later chapters. He's introduced there, chapter 12, and then identified explicitly later in the book. It's Satan. But then who are these? Who is this sea beast? What's that represent? The land beast and this harlot that we get into. Where are we going with this?
Let's take a look at the dragon. In Revelation chapter 12, if you'll open your New Testament, we're in Revelation chapter 12. We're going to look at the first of this unholy triad. I should tell you this before you're turning over there. In Revelation, one of the things we would probably do well to stick to is that there is a difference between fulfillment and application. In talking about Rome as the persecutor, in talking about Rome as the villain, the agent through whom Satan works, this does not then mean that the book is not to be applied today. There's a difference, though, between fulfillment, if this were fulfilled in Rome, and then saying something about application. Listen, whatever beast is going on through, whatever beast is in view here in Revelation, it is, oh yes it is, symbolic of an entire worldview. The worldview is that of an unholy or an ungodly stance against God. And so it just happens to be in John's day that the villain is Rome. In the same way that there was a villain in Nazi Germany, communist Russia, etc., etc., etc. You go back to the Old Testament, you look at Egypt with the pharaohs, you look at Assyria with Tiglath-Pileser or Sennacherib or one of the others, you look at Babylon with maybe Nabopolassar or Nebuchadnezzar. In the same way, that there have been world politicians, we might say, whether from the distant past or the more recent past and even into the future, the worldview is one of the oppressor. It's the worldview of the oppressor. Now, what we need to do is, this is a phrase taken from Richard Hayes, we need to learn how to read the literature in a way that we can transpose it into our own key. Now, what he means by that is something like we've got to learn to read with the original context in view, lift it from its original context, and make that application stick. That's what we need to be doing with the book of Revelation. In Revelation chapter 12, this one is, as Todd said, clear enough. The dragon is Satan. So there's this apocalyptic scene. In Revelation chapter 12, there's a battle that's going on. And on the one hand, you've got God and the Lamb Lion and the saints, the 144,000, and some good angels, and Michael the archangel. All of that's on one side of the aisle. On the other side, we have Revelation 12, the dragon. And we'll find out in chapter 13, the sea beast and the land beast. And you've got some bad angels, some sour fellows that went wrong. And you've got the earth dwellers, as said, over against the heaven dwellers. And all of this is in the drama to give us two armies. You've got the Lamb Lion with his 144,000, and you've got the dragon and the beasts with their squad behind them. Which one are you going to follow? Well, in Revelation chapter 12, the image we get is a cosmic battle that's happening in the drama, in the movie, in the vision, and the cosmic battle is between Michael and the archangels and Satan and his. And this is Revelation 12, 7 through 9 that I'm around. There was war in heaven. Michael and the angels waged war with the dragon. But it says in 12:9 that this dragon was the serpent of old, and it explicitly says he was the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. That's the battle. Now think about this for a second. In the book of Job, you have Job and the friends. But who's the real battle between? Isn't the real battle between God and Satan? You see, Job and the friends just happens to be, that's the battleground for a bigger war that's going on between God and Satan, and God's determined to win it. But victory, in the case of Job, doesn't just look like being a power hitter and coming out swinging. Victory in the book of Job looks like patient, enduring suffering in faithfulness to God. And at the end of it all, when all the dust is settled, who's victorious in the book of Job? Isn't it God? Well, what about the book of Revelation? You see, it's about patient, enduring, suffering in the book of Revelation. There are martyrs in one scene, Revelation 6, 9 through 11. And they're crying out, "How long, O Lord?" They're crying out about how long are we going to be faithful? And as we pointed out in our last show, it was even unto death, Revelation 2:10. These are the martyrs who are saying, how long are we going to have to endure this trial, this persecution, this suffering? And who is behind it all? Who is this war really about? Who is it really against? It is the saints working for God over against the dragon, the devil, and his squad with Rome. In this day and time, it's Rome. In your day and time, you pick. Maybe it's your boss who doesn't treat you right. Maybe it's a relative who you can't seem to get along with. Maybe it's a colleague. Maybe it's somebody that you really struggled with the other day on the road because of your road rage. In whatever environment, listen, folks, in whatever environment it is, God is counting on you to be faithful. And the battle is not merely because of your road rage. It's not merely with a relative. It's not merely with a colleague. It's not with your boss. That might be the stage where the battle is set, but the battle is between you and your decision to be faithful to God. And in the book of Revelation, God is telling the saints, whatever Satan throws at you, you determine you're going to be faithful. In the book of Genesis, there was this snake, right? Genesis chapter 3, 1 through 15. In Romans chapter 16, verse 20, it talks about Satan, the enemy, as being the serpent, the devil. And here in Revelation 12, we have this image that's an old image. It's the image of Satan from long ago. And God's letting us know that he really is the enemy. Todd, the enemy that they're up against in the book of Revelation is the enemy you and I are up against. It's the same enemy
Yes.
we've been up against since the world began. It's the devil. It's the dragon. He is trying to get us to go against God. We need to determine to be faithful.
Amen. And you just see the tools in his hand here. That's what we're going to turn to with the sea beast,
That's
the
right.
land beast, in the world power. But the dragon is behind it all. So today, he's using different means, different tools. He can use world powers today, manipulate them to bring about destruction and to lead people away. You can look at any number of systems where, the gospel can't even be there.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And so that is a situation. Now, is that going to stand forever? No.
Right. Right.
At the end of the day, the Lamb's going to be victorious no matter what power Satan uses against the saints. The theme is still the same. In the end, we're going to see, as powerful as this looked, and you look at the image.
Yeah.
A dragon.
Yeah.
The sea beast, this land beast, this harlot and a scarlet beast, and all. It's terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are terrifying things happening today, aren't there?
There sure are.
But what's going to happen in the end? That's the trick. That's the key to Christian living and making sense of our world. And that's why he uses an apocalypse. A lot of people treat that like this is veiled. It's actually an unveiling.
That's right.
He's pulling the curtain back on this public narrative that Rome is all of this.
Absolutely.
And he's pointing out she's filthy and wretched and a beast. Stick with the Lamb, the lion lamb, who died, who rose again, who is coming again. He's going to deal with all of this stuff. And Rome's going to be dealt with, as we're going to see. So the dragon may appear to be winning by the instrumentality of these two beasts and this world power, but that's not how it's actually happening.
That's right. And at the end of the scene, the final scene of the drama, we're going to see the dragon going into the lake of fire.
Yes.
That's where it ends. That's the last picture we get about the dragon. He's cast to eternal judgment. He's not a victor.
Yes. And peace on those who
That's right.
were martyred for the testimony
That's right.
of Jesus Christ. And nothing's changed.
Yep.
Nothing has changed. So let's look at this sea beast. John sees the villain as being a beast from the seas. Satan is using this sea beast to wreak havoc on the saints. Okay, and we're gonna compress this quite a bit here, but I would recommend that for Revelation chapters 13 and 17 especially, you don't even approach those until you go spend some time in Daniel chapter 7. Daniel sees a very similar vision of 4 beasts particularly, but he hones in on the 4th one. And in that, he is going to talk about, he sees these 10 horns, and it's representative of rulers in this 4th beast. If we track this through, and it's similar to what we see in Daniel chapter 2 as well with the image that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his vision. There again, Daniel reveals by the power of God that there were 4 kingdoms, culminating, notwithstanding the modern liberal critical view that Daniel was some sort of later author. We hold that Daniel is who he says he was in the book. Jesus seemed to think so too. And ultimately, it ends in Rome. Daniel 2, Daniel 7, they all bring us to Rome. That's the reason why when we look at what's happening, specifically in Revelation chapter 17, when he starts to talk about this beast that you saw, he says that there were, verse 9, here's the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is. So if we can figure out who the 5 that have fallen at the time John is writing this is talking about, and the one who is, okay, and the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue a short time. The beast that was and is not is himself also the 8th, and is of the 7 and is going to perdition. Now this gets hairy. It gets a little difficult to break down, but I'm going to give you the short version, and if you like more information on it, I'd be happy to provide it. Just reach out to us at the Elizabethan Church of Christ website, and I'll be happy to send you the reasons in more detail. There's every reason to think that this one who is is Emperor Vespasian, and that it is talking about pointing forward to one of his sons that was going to be in place, and that being Domitian. But we know, whatever we do with that, however you want to break down the exact timing of it, and people will make arguments against what I just said. Most actually would, either earlier date going back to Emperor Nero or later date to the time of Domitian. That's the two primary views that are set forth. But ultimately, what's happening is this dragon, which has been identified explicitly already in chapter 12 as Satan, is using this beast, which is an empire. You look at the parallel, it's plain that John is pulling from Daniel chapter 7. Daniel, looking forward, he sees this beast and these rulers and describes the events that were taking place at that time. John is looking now back at 5 that have already been, 1 that is, and then what's going to ultimately come. And he makes it plain that what we have here is the dragon using Rome to persecute. Okay, the similarity between Revelation and Daniel is phenomenal and undeniable, really. And so this sea beast is no doubt Rome. What about the land beast? Drew's going to get us into that a little bit later, but this sea beast, Drew, we know is Rome, and Rome is the instrument of Satan that's being set forth here. The land beast, we're convinced is, and you're going to lead us into this in more detail, but is an instrument that's used by this sea beast.
Absolutely.
That is Rome, in order to enforce the policies that ultimately bring the persecution on these Christians and bring this whole situation to pass.
Absolutely. I might say just a quick word historically about what you've just said about 13 and then 17 especially. We're going to see this image in 13, 1 through 4. We're hanging around Revelation 13, 1 through 4 at this point. And the question would be, well, how many heads are on the beast? Well, the text is explicit that there are 7 heads on the beast. But it's also clear enough in chapter 13 that while we have 7 heads, one of those gets lopped off. Mm-hmm. It's wounded unto death, the text says. And then there's another head that rises up to take its place. 17:11, speaking of that same beast, is going to say he is the 8th, but is of the 7. Mm-hmm. Now, this is interesting. We have 7, 1 is lopped off. The 8th shoots up to take its place, but it still only has 7 heads on the beast. Here's what's going on. You've got Augustus, the first Roman Caesar, yes. Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero. Then you had a couple of upstart generals who tried to take over after the Julio-Claudian dynasty went out.
Year of 4 emperors.
That's it. Doesn't take, not a one of them becomes the real emperor. Finally, a new dynasty begins. You have Vespasian. He has an oldest son, Titus. That's 7. Sure. And then one of those beasts in the apocalyptic drama, in the vision, in the movie, is chopped off. The head is chopped off, leaving us with 6. Well, an 8th head sprouts up, leaving the 7 on the beast. This is something like out of Greek mythology. Mm-hmm. And it is Domitian, the 8th Roman emperor, but he is of the 7-headed beast in the vision, in the drama. That's clear enough. And we'll see a little bit more in chapter 17. But Domitian is the boss. He's the one. Now, this is interesting. He was the first Roman emperor to come along and say, while yet alive, you call me God in the flesh. Yes. And he set up an imperial cult that was already being used, but he was the first to enforce it while he was alive, where you were forced to go throughout the provinces, take your pinch of incense, cast it before a bust of him, Caesar, and declare Caesar is Lord. Now that's striking, because when they're being forced in the first century to declare somebody other than God or Christ is Lord, the saints are at an immediate crisis.
Can't do it.
They cannot do it. They cannot do it. That'd be like us being forced to swear our patriotism over and above our Christianity. We cannot do it.
And there's a danger in that.
There is a big danger.
Better watch out.
That's right.
Because there are some who are doing that.
That's exactly right. Even in the Lord's church, yes. There were people here who were tempted to go into patriotism, nationalism, rather than Christianity. And that's part of the crisis here. So when we turn to this land beast in Revelation 13, he is reinforcing everything that was the policy of Satan being used through Rome. Now take a look at this. In Revelation chapter 13, we get a picture of the land beast in 13:11. 13:11. Now, if you've got your finger, throw it down in Revelation 13 for a second and turn one page back. There was an earlier foreshadowing in chapter 10. John saw in an earlier clip of the movie he saw an angel, and his right foot, it says, was on the sea, Revelation 10:2, and his left foot was on the land, Revelation 10:2. Is there something significant about this angel with a foot on the sea and a foot on the land? There is something significant about it. That's foreshadowing that God's already got power over whatever comes out of the sea and the land. Now, when we go to Revelation 13, we've had a beast come up out of the sea. Well, the angel was standing upon it. We've got a beast coming up out of the land, and God's angel was standing upon it. Before we ever even find out anything about this villain, this beast, the dragon, we know that God's victorious over such. So even though it's going to be a very formidable opponent, God's the victor. Don't fret. Nothing here is of substance. God is ultimately the overcomer. We better well side with him. In 13:11, then, we get this land beast, this picture, pops up out of the earth. He's got horns like a lamb. He's parodying the lamb lion. But he spoke as a dragon. He's Satan's agent. Now, interestingly enough, if you look at 13:12, he exercises the authority of that sea beast. It says in chapter 13 and verse 15, it was given to the land beast to give breath to the image of the sea beast. He's his police force. He's his strong arm, if you will. And consistently in the rest of the book, chapter 16 and verse 13, it's not going to call him the land beast. It's going to call him the false prophet. The dragon, the sea beast, and the land beast, which is going to consistently be termed the false prophet. He's the strong arm, the police force, the speaker that exercises, tips his hat in favor of the sea beast. It says that in chapter 16:13. It says it again in 19:20. He's called the false prophet. His work is to reinforce Satan's work through the oppressor Rome. And the saints then, of course, are at a crossroads. Do we cave to the pressure, or do we be faithful? What would you do? What would you do? Be faithful or cave to the pressure? Our determination with a biblical viewpoint is to be faithful, to be overcomers by the blood of the Lamb. Todd, there's one more observation we ought to make just to home in on this is the world empire of John's day, but the application is not to be lost.
Yes.
In the same way that they're up against it then, we're up against it now. We've got to determine to be faithful.
And so, the paradigm that's given us here, that's what's important.
That's right.
And hard for us to get our minds around
Yeah.
is that no matter what power Satan uses, it's always Satan that's behind it. It's always Jesus that's the answer, okay? And it can look overwhelming, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we find ourselves wringing our hands like, where do we go? What do we do?
Yeah.
But we see people in lands right now where they live every day as Christians knowing that they may lose their life because they're Christians. We have very little of that in our land. We need to be thankful for that. We need to use that freedom to get on with the work that we have to do. But we need to live in confidence that even if we lose that, it's not the end of the world.
That's right.
It's terrible. We don't want it. But ultimately, the villain here is Rome, as we'll see. Our villains may be different, but the solution's still the same.
That's right. That's
so
exactly.
let's take a look at this villain. Who is this? This world power. Well, it's pictured as a harlot on the back of a beast, chapter 17, verses 1 through 5. And if you look at the description of it, and we're just going to kind of look at several things that are stated here very quickly and point out this is why we are convinced that this is Rome and no other. Okay? Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and talked with me, saying to me, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication." So they're in cahoots. And the inhabitants of the earth were made drunk with the wine of her fornication. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast, which was full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet and adorned with gold and precious stones and pearls, having in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the filthiness of her fornication. And on her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. And if you get back into the description from a moment ago, the 7 heads that we have here are said to be 7 hills or 7 mountains. Verse 18 of this same chapter lets us know that this power, this woman, is the city, the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. In the days of John, that was Rome. There's no question about it. was sitting on 7 hills or mountains. Rome was called the Septimontium, 7-hilled city. Okay, it is known that it sat on 7 hills. It was also the commercial power in the world of that time. So when we take all of this together, everything suggests that Satan is using Rome here. The events were near, as was pointed out by Drew in our introduction to this. The beasts align with what we see in Daniel, the timing of which brings us to Rome. The descriptions of the villain in the drama match the world power in John's day. And so, Drew, when we take all of that together, I think there's a really solid case to say this is Rome at work. Yeah. Satan using Rome, and specifically a particular arm of Rome in the imperial cult enforcing the emperor worship. Look at the mark of the beast. I think the explanation for that is in that certification that is known from history to have been given when you burn that pinch of incense and say, Lord God Caesar. You got that mark. Yeah. So where do we go from here?
Now, what's our big takeaway? What's our big takeaway? 2 things. Number 1, there's no substance with Rome, no substance with the devil. The money, the power, the prestige, it all vanishes. There's nothing lasting. There is endurance. There is eternality in faithfulness to God.
John says, he that hath the ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. Now, wait a minute. John, I thought you were writing. Why didn't you say, let them that have ears hear what I'm writing? No, he says, what the Spirit saith to the churches. The Spirit was speaking by divine revelation through John's writing. So when they read John's writing, they wasn't really reading the writings of John. They were reading the writings of God. And John wanted to emphasize that point to each one of these 7 churches. And through that message, we learned today how God speaks to us through the written revelation given to us by the apostles.
Well, through these frightening evils that we've been looking at, here's how it ends, right? Chapter 19, verse 20, then the beast was captured, and with him the false prophet who worked signs in his presence, by which he deceived those who received the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image. These 2 were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone. And the rest were killed with the sword which proceeded from the mouth of him who sat on the horse, and all the birds were filled with their flesh. Chapter 20, verse 10, we find this. The devil who deceived them was cast into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. That's how it ends.
Yeah, I think that's important to notice. And the saints reading this would pick that up. The end of this, whatever we're to make out of all of the pictures, the images, the illustrations that we've seen in the vision and the drama, it ends with them going away to judgment. The other scene is the saints go to victory. And that's where Revelation 20 through 22 takes us. The saints are victorious, the enemy is not.
Amen.
We have heard the joyful sound.
Thank you for joining us today on Biblical Viewpoints. If you have a question concerning the things taught on this program, desire to enroll in our free home Bible study course, or have some other way we may assist you in your quest to know the truth, you may contact us at Biblical Viewpoints, 137 East C Street, Elizabethton, Tennessee, 37643. In the meantime, we encourage you to find a Church of Christ meeting in your community and worship with them. You will always find a hearty welcome and a group of Christians eager to serve you.